Ms. Indira Rampal Chetty, Permanent Secretary, Acting, Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, members of the media, and members of the viewing public. We are gathered and are coming to you live from the Office of the Prime Minister's Central Administrative Services Tobago's headquarters, located at Orange Hill Road, Lower Scarborough, Tobago. We are gathered here to discuss matters pertaining to the Registrar General's Department's sub-office in Tobago. I am Alesmoy Mackenzie, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you here this afternoon. At this time, I hand over to Senator the Honorable Reginald TV Armour SC, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to take you through this afternoon's proceedings.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Madam Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Indira Rampal Chetty, members of the media, members of the viewing and listening public joining us across our respective media platforms, and those of you present with us today. I thank everybody for being here this afternoon. Let me apologize for the absence of our Registrar General, Mrs. Karen Bridgewater, who was supposed to be here but regrettably is not well and was unable to get on the flight with us this morning. As Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, I have been engaged in staying abreast of a number of comments in the public space relating to the Registrar General's department and the operations and delivery of services of that department to the people of Tobago. Beyond the more recent spotlight, concerns impacting the delivery of services to the people of Tobago by the Registrar General's department have held my attention for much of this year. A significant amount of dialogue and discourse has taken place with key stakeholders over the last couple of months. A number of issues and related challenges have been identified, which culminated in me taking a note to the Cabinet in August of this very year to address some of the main concerns confronting the people of Tobago and the operations of the Registrar General's Department. These issues have included, but were not limited, to reporting ambiguities, other staffing concerns, and delivery of service to the people of Tobago. In continuance of those efforts and further to instructions from the Honorable Prime Minister, I have this morning held a meeting with key stakeholders. I was accompanied by my Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Indira Rampal Chetty, Deputy Registrar General, Mrs. Nicole Munan, and Mr. Francis, ICT Manager, RGD, the latter of whom, Mrs. Munan and Mr. Francis, attended virtually. We engaged with members of the Parliament of Tobago East, Honorable Ayana Webster Roy, and Tobago West, Honorable Mrs. Shamfa Kojo-Lewis, and the Tobago Lawyers Association, right here in this building, and Mrs. Dawn Palakdari Singh, President, and Miss Trudy Caraballo. I hope I got her name wrong. I've been having difficulty with the name, so I will simply say Trudy, following on their letter to the Law Association earlier this year, in which they raised concerns over operational issues that were impacting the service being experienced by the association's membership and, by extension, the people of Tobago. Unfortunately, the contents of that letter were subsequently politicized, with inflammatory remarks being aligned to it, but which were not part of the content of the letter. I am pleased to share with you today those objectives in mind, and I can readily say that this morning's session was meaningful and quite productive. We received input, engaged in candid discussions, identified and addressed concerns, explored some of the Registrar General Department's accomplishments to date in the resolution of existing challenges, and have sought, as a work in progress, to outline the short-term resolution and its intended implementation. This may be an appropriate stage to provide some clarity and context by pointing out that the Registrar General's Office is the single nationally and internationally accepted source of truth. What do I mean by that? The Registrar General is the single source of truth nationally and internationally for vital statistics, registration of births, deaths, adoptions, and marriages, real property, companies, lis pendens, judgments, and estates. The sanctity of the Registrar General's records can never be in doubt and are not to be trifled with. If they are, no country will recognize our passports, our identification cards, our legal status, or our ownership of land. It is as simple as that. This is because in law, the Registrar General of Trinidad and Tobago is vested with the sole responsibility for the administration, maintenance, and operation of the nation's civil, land, and companies registries. The records for which the Registrar General is responsible confer identity, civil status, titles to land, and legitimize the status of corporate entities. And consequently, the vital records maintained by the Registrar General's Department are critical not only to all citizens, residents, and members of the business community, but also to law enforcement, state entities, and several other stakeholders. It is in this regard that the Registrar General's Department established an office here in Tobago to ensure efficient and effective delivery of its services on the island and to the peoples of Tobago, consistent with the mandate of Act No. 37 of 1980, which provided for the making of better provision for the administration of Tobago. As a natural consequence, there are significant and far-reaching implications for how that department therefore executes its duties and how the lines of responsibility and accountability are discharged. With such a significant responsibility, it stands to reason that strict control and accountability measures must be established and adhered to. If not controlled, if not managed in accordance with the Registrar General's systems, which are grounded in law, our birth certificates, passports, deeds, and companies will be recognized by no one. It bears repeating, our passports, IDs, credit cards, and soon to include our digital signatures will no longer be recognized or accepted by anyone. It is for this very critical reason that I am able to report that all services, all processes, and procedures are consistent for the Registrar General's Department across all Registrar General's sub-offices throughout Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to impress upon the public then that suggestions of wanting to control everything from Trinidad or to recolonize Tobago through the Registrar General's Department reflects an alarming lack of understanding of the law and or a complete disregard of the responsibilities of leadership. There has been no recent change in approved operating procedures in Tobago. There has been no effort by the Cabinet of the Government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, of which I am proud to be Attorney General, to reduce any operational autonomy of the Tobago Office of the Registrar General. In fact, the opposite is true. Since the intervention of Cabinet in August of this year, the efforts by both the Cabinet and the Registrar General's Office have been to expand the service capability and to improve on the delivery of services to the peoples of Tobago. I say this because one of the measures agreed to by Cabinet on the 15th of August, 2024, was the restructuring of the Registrar General's Department as a means of removing the perceived blurred lines which previously existed between the Registrar General's Department and OPM CAST as it related to the seamless discharge of the services of the Registrar General's Department in the Tobago office. These efforts align themselves with an overarching intention of the government to improve service delivery and lent a significant framework to our discussions this morning. One of the key reviews of this morning's discussion was a snapshot of the year-to-date productivity of the Tobago sub-office. We had very candid discussions about the shortcomings in management oversight, staff challenges of the Tobago Office of the Registrar General's Department, and service delivery as an extension of the foregoing. I can give a breakdown of some of the information coming out of the ICT department, which details the number of certificates printed from January 2024 to November 27, 2024, close to 14,000 certificates out of the Tobago office. So for birth certificates, 8,485 certificates were printed. For marriage certificates, 1,538 certificates were printed. And for death certificates, 3,829, giving a total, which is why I said close to 14,000, of 13,852 certificates. Of this total, over 9,000 civil registry certificates have been issued out of the Tobago sub-office over the past 6 months. All of these registry certificates have been issued and printed out of the Tobago office during this calendar year. With respect to land registry, a snapshot of the various services transacted at the office in Tobago shows that a year-to-date total, again as at November 27, 2024, of 693 transactions have all been conducted at the Tobago office. A grand total of deeds, January 123, and that is across wills, judgments, deeds, charges, bills. A grand total for February 85, a grand total of March 59, a grand total of April 56, May 58, June 53, July 60, August 74, September 52, October 37, November 36, December not yet completed, and therefore we are not given a total for that month. The total being 693, demonstrating that the Office of the Registrar General's Department in Tobago is functioning. Notwithstanding all the work that is being done, however, and it is part of the reason why I am here to engage with the stakeholders, we acknowledge reports of members of the public being turned away and being misinformed that there are specific services that they are now to go to Trinidad to access and or to transact. This came as a surprise to us since there has been absolutely no instruction issued by the Registrar General to this effect. So for any employee of the Tobago sub-office to misguide the public in that manner is inconsistent with policy and any directive. And I want to reiterate that the Tobago office continues to have the full functional capabilities that they've always had, which is consistent with the service capabilities of all other Registrar General offices. We acknowledge that some of these services are not being delivered in alignment with our expectations and at a standard that the people of Tobago deserve. Ladies and gentlemen, members of Tobago public, as Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, I stand here today to apologize to the people of Tobago and undertake by my very presence here today at the meeting that I had this morning and being in Tobago for this media conference to continue to engage in ensuring the build-out of the capacity of the Department of the Registrar General's Department in its delivery of services to the people of Tobago. Regrettably, we have uncovered some credibility in reports of a poor service experience for a number of persons that have been seeking to access services from the Tobago office. In our investigation so far, we have identified that there have been some deeds, a number of deeds, deed polls, will duties, and bills of sale that had not been processed for submission over the last 2 months, totaling over 50 documents. These have since been addressed, and it has been narrowed down to the actions of 1 or 2 employees, with investigations continuing and with the requisite action to be taken. I can say no more at this point. In the interim, in order to address these matters, I have given instructions, and the Registrar General's Department is engaged in immediately establishing a Tobago help desk with a designated hotline and email address to provide a channel for the public of Tobago, members of this island, to report these instances and to have access for prompt and urgent resolution. The contact information for that help desk and hotline will be published to treat with those anomalies with the urgency which they deserve. It is important to note, and I wish to reiterate again, that the standard operating procedures at the Tobago sub-office are in no way different from what obtains at any of the other offices located in Arima and San Fernando. All the processes and procedures are consistent across all the offices and are unchanged in Tobago. For the reasons that I've already outlined when I spoke about the single source of truth, the strict adherence to management and control measures, as I earlier stated, stem from the simple fact that the Registrar General is the singular, nationally and internationally accepted source of truth. In closing, what we in the Cabinet have in fact approved on the 15th of August 2024 is the hiring of more staff for the Tobago sub-office to improve the standard and reliability of services to the people of Tobago. Getting the approval to hire more staff in this economic climate should not be taken lightly, and I thank the Honorable Prime Minister and the Cabinet. It underscores the priority that the government places on improving the quality of service to the people of Tobago. After an initial period of some operational transitions from OPM CAST to the Registrar General Department, a lot of work is in progress and a lot of work has in fact been completed to progress these solutions forward expeditiously. Since mid-October of this year, the Registrar General Department has started the recruitment process for hiring more staff, and they have since expanded the footprint with a view to offering expanded services. Our short-term action plan, expected to be activated within the upcoming 6 weeks, under managerial: 1, the deployment of a deputy registrar acting temporarily assigned at the Tobago sub-office until the Judicial and Legal Service Commission appoints an assistant registrar general for Tobago. That deputy registrar acting will be at the Tobago sub-office 4 days weekly from Monday to Thursday, and an assistant registrar will additionally be present each Friday. So you will have 5 days continued service every week until we put in place the more permanent measures after we get the relevant approvals from the Judicial and Legal Service Commission. This arrangement, temporarily in place, commenced as at Monday, the 9th of December, and will ensure and facilitate the smooth and efficient training of those new members of staff and provide critical support for the delivery of additional services, as well as the adherence to policies, practices, and protocols of the Registrar General's Department. Secondly, the hiring of an office manager. Advertisements were placed for this and other vacancies in October this year, and we are currently engaged in the recruitment process, which we expect to be completed by the end of January 2025. Thirdly, the hiring of 2 senior legal officers. They have been interviewed, selected, and are expected to take up duties during the course of this very week. As far as resources are concerned, the Office of the Registrar General's Office, hiring of office staff, interviews are currently being conducted with the intention and aim of increasing the human resource capacity at the Tobago sub-office. This should be completed by the end of this week, and it seeks to ensure efficient and effective operations at the Tobago sub-office. Secondly, the hiring of ICT personnel and equipment upgrade to reduce the downtime in the event of any ICT issues. So there will no longer be a situation in which you have ICT issues here preventing the uploading of documents to the head office, and that having to be remedied by waiting for someone to come from Trinidad to address that in Tobago. We are going to have persons on the ground in Tobago addressing the operational resources and the operational challenges that come up. Thirdly, expanding the footprint of the office to facilitate increased staff and additional services to expedite the delivery of service to the people of Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, I can understand that there has been a degree of frustration. It has not been assisted or assuaged by the presence of social media, on which lots of stuff go out there that are not necessarily verified. And it is for that reason that, as I said at the very beginning, I have been engaged in keeping an eye on what has been taking place in the island of Tobago under the umbrella of the Registrar General's Department, for which as Line Minister I am responsible. I intend to continue to keep a very active eye on what is taking place and in the build-out of what we are putting in place for Tobago in the next 6 weeks into the early part of next year, January. I give the solemn commitment and undertaking that we will continue to keep you updated and return to you with any engagements that we need to have with stakeholders in order to ensure that we are on the ground and responding as the challenges emerge. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Candace Jackson from Tobago Updates.
Good afternoon.
What was missing from your explanation is the reasons why we've been having problems. Because I'm trying to understand why is it that there were so many disruptions in services, and why is it that people were just being too nosy? What was the real issue affecting service delivery at the Tobago office?
And we were told that the Registrar General
Yes.
out Tobago.
Because we kept hearing that. We kept hearing that from multiple
Chief
cases.
Sorry, I mean, I'm not sure who I'm sorry, I'm not sure who I'm answering and what are the questions now. So can we take them one at a time, if you don't mind? And yeah.
I know you said you dismissed that there was no attempt to control or to deny services from Tobago, but that is completely opposite from what we've been hearing. So what I need to hear from you now is, what is the real reason? What is the source of the problems that we've been facing for months here in Tobago?
So I'm going to answer that. What's the name again? Sorry. Candace, Ms. Jackson. I'm going to answer that in two parts. The second part I will deal with first, which is to say that the details of the answers to the question that you need, I will need to get from the Registrar General, who regrettably is not with us today because she's not well. So I undertake, as I said at the end of my earlier statement, that I will continue to engage with the public as the need arises. But in terms of the first part of the answer that I want to give, there has been information out there of people being turned away. As I said earlier, some of that we are verifying. We have not as yet verified. There are actually investigations of a couple bits of misinformation that have been put out by persons. But I can say candidly and without fear of contradiction in answer to your question that I think that there has been a less than effective coordination of information passing between the operational management and the underground management in order to address the complaints that were coming to the Registrar General's office. And it is the reason why I'm here today to give the assurance that we are going to ensure that those operational shortcomings are not repeated.
Liz Williams, TV6 News, I-95.5 and the Express newspaper. Did any information come to you concerning the Registrar General in Trinidad locking out Tobago? Because that is what we were being told, that the Registrar General in Trinidad locked out the people of Tobago, so therefore certain systems could not go ahead. In addition, in terms of when you are registering your company, etc.
Okay, no, go ahead, because no, go ahead, because what you're about to go to was part of the answer I was going to give to the first. So go ahead, yeah.
There's a situation also where online you can't there was a delay for months
Yeah.
with persons being able to properly register their foundations, etc. I went through that problem also. I decided to go to Trinidad to the office of the Attorney General's office, and what I realized is that in Trinidad, it's easier to do the process. However, when I reached there, I was told that certain documents to file for that, they are not using those documents anymore. I asked, when will these documents be available? They said they don't know. New documents are going to come in place. How soon can the people of Tobago see that?
Can I address the first two questions before we get to how soon? So the first part of your question dealt with lockout. And then the second part of your question dealt with the systems, and you went on to talk about the companies. Correct? Good. The information that I have, and in fact, in the discussions that we had earlier today, in the face of very searching questions that were put to the ICT manager, Mr. Kieron Francis, I think is Mr. Kieron Francis, who was present with us earlier today. Very searching questions were put to him along those lines by the two members of Parliament for Tobago East and West, as well as by Ms. Palak Dari Singh, and truly, not going to try and get into her last name, of the Lawyers Association. And it had to do with the question of the lockout. And what Mr. Francis explained, and it is important to appreciate the context in which the word lockout is being used, there is no question that anybody had a door closed in their face. The term lockout that is being used has to do with systems on the computers to give you access to information. So let's understand that that's what we're talking about, because when I first heard the term lockout, because yes, people were calling me and saying they're being locked out, I thought that the registrar, it was being said the Registrar General had shut the doors of the office in Tobago. Okay, so the explanation for that is that there have been a number of software upgrades to the operating systems of the Registrar General's operations in Trinidad and Tobago. And by that, what do I mean? About a year ago, the operating system for the companies crashed. And that goes to the last point that you made, that some forms are no longer available and new forms have to come on board. The point is that the operating system for companies crashed and a new system was purchased, a new software system was purchased and installed. And the instructions on that new system is that for security reasons, only the persons operating the system in Trinidad are allowed access to the operating systems. And for that reason, there were persons in Tobago, in the office of the Registrar General's office in Tobago, who did not have the passwords and the operating entry into the systems to enable them to get access. That is being remedied to the extent that it can be, but it is not something that can be remedied overnight, because all of this is part of the security systems for the operating software that has been purchased. What we are hoping to do in setting up, and we've actually have delivered to Tobago within the last couple of days in the new short-term plan that we are building out, is we are hoping to have a suite of computers and hardware in Tobago office to be able to operate the software, and to have someone who is going to be the permanent ICT person in Tobago who will be able to give that limited control access to the operating software of the Registrar General software that serves all of Trinidad and Tobago. And it goes back to the point of the security of the systems of the Registrar General's operations, because a lot of that information is very critically sensitive and has to be kept secure.
In your opinion, do you think that you took too long to intervene in this situation?
No, I don't think we took too long, because you have to put it in context. And I am not, by what I'm about to say, I am not casting any blame and I'm not pointing any fingers. But the cabinet intervened in August of this year as a result of concerns that were being expressed to the cabinet to equip the Registrar General's Department to take full control of what was being previously operated by a combination of CAST, Tobago, and Registrar General Tobago. And there were blurred lines of communication that were leading to less than effective implementation of the actions of the Registrar General's office in Tobago. That is why Cabinet intervened in August to enable new systems, new staff, more space to be equipped in Tobago for the operation of the system. And I will be perfectly honest with you, Ms. Williams, it's Ms. Williams, right? I would be contradicted if I were to say that things could be accomplished overnight in the public service. Things in the public service take time. And therefore, by a cabinet decision that was made in August of this year, there were a number of things that had to be put in place. Applications had to be built out. Advertisements had to go out for different positions. Up to recently, interviews were still going on and are still being undertaken. These things take time. So I wouldn't say we took too long. I would say that we recognize that we need to build out the capacity of Tobago better than it has been built out in the past, and that is what we are doing now, and looking ahead to make sure that we do not repeat whatever errors were committed in the past.
With Attorney General again, in terms of the Registrar General, she said that she was not able to be here today because she's unwell.
That's correct.
But has there been any attempt to have that conversation, that multi-stakeholder conversation, especially after the Tobago Lawyers Association wrote to you to outline a number of issues? Has there been any other attempt to make sure we could have that meeting to resolve these issues before now?
Well, let me correct something first of all. The Tobago Lawyers Association, and it was actually a discussion that we had quite candidly this morning. The Tobago Lawyers Association did not write to me. The Tobago Lawyers Association, and I have the letter here, it's dated the 4th of November, 2024. It is addressed to Mrs. Lynette Seabaran-Sweet. And to her credit, the president, this is Lynette Seabaran-Sweet, president of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And to her credit, Mrs. Seabaran-Sweet brought that letter to my attention. The last paragraph of the letter says, we are respectfully appealing to LAT, the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago, as our representative body, to urgently intercede on our behalf with relevant authorities, particularly the Minister of the Attorney General, Minister of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs and the Registrar General. So when this letter was brought to my attention, I made the decision that among the things that I was going to do was to come to Tobago to meet with the Lawyers Association, and that's what I did this morning.
To follow what's been happening?
The other attempts that have been ongoing have been continued discussions in Cabinet among the members of Cabinet, informed by the members of Cabinet who are the two MPs out of Tobago, Honorable Shamfa Kojo-Lewis, Honorable Ayanna Webster-Roy, and I believe it was, and I think it was earlier, not I believe, it was earlier this year, I have had meetings at my office in Port of Spain with Permanent Secretary Erland Kent and Minister Webster-Roy and my Permanent Secretary, all with a view to addressing the challenges that are coming up. It was coming out of those efforts that we had undertaken to meet with stakeholders earlier this year that I did the note to Cabinet recognizing that there was, as I said earlier, a certain amount of less than clear communication between OPM and the Registrar General's Department in Port of Spain, I took the note to Cabinet and I asked Cabinet, which is what Cabinet has done, to give the entire operation and financial control of the Office of Registrar General back to the Registrar General, because legally that is where the authority lies. When you look at the different legislation which creates the Registrar General's office, it's created by the Registrar General's Act, it's created by the Judicial and Legal Service Act, it's referred to in the Constitution. There was never any legislation that gave a role and function to OPM CAS to perform any services of the Registrar General's Department. It was a departmental decision taken under the former government of the People's Partnership that had created CAS to deal with the OPM, to deal with the Registrar General. And to that extent, because there was a lack of clarity, the signals were getting mixed. I'll say no further than that.
Pleasant afternoon. I know you were
Sorry.
Carissa Douglas.
Sorry, I didn't see you. Yes. Thank you.
Carissa Douglas, TTT News. I know you mentioned in terms of some of the measures that are being put in place, the hiring processes are being undertaken. But if you can give a timeline as to when all of these things would be addressed, put into place, and we'll see some improvement in the services being provided at the office. Please, that's my first question.
You notice I smiled.
Yes.
Because we're going to hold you to it.
And that's why I smiled. I would want to hope, and I'm going to continue to press people to do their jobs. I would want to hope that we will have a timeline in the short term, and you will recall in the timeline I gave short term. In the short term, 6 weeks from today. And why I'm as careful as I'm being to say I would want to hope is that as Attorney General, standing here today, given the undertaking which I have given to the people of Tobago, I don't have control over all of the different bodies that have functions and responsibilities to discharge. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that is a very significant conversation that is taking place right now. It was taking place before today, and it was emphasized today in the conversation that we had with Ministers Webster Roy, Shamfa Kajo-Lewis, and the Law Association, the Lawyers Association, is the question, should Tobago not have a Deputy Registrar General as opposed to an Assistant Registrar General? Okay? That is something that has been very seriously discussed today. I have given certain commitments to my cabinet colleagues, Ministers Webster Roy and Kajo-Lewis, and to the Lawyers Association. But I can't determine the office of Registrar General or the creation of the office of Deputy Registrar General. That is a function of the Judicial and Legal Service Commission. So the most that I can give is an undertaking to begin to have conversations with other organizations that have constitutional responsibilities with a view to expediting where I think the solutions can be found. To that extent, I am cautious about giving you a deadline earlier than the 6 weeks, and I don't think that this one will happen in 6 weeks if we were to have a Deputy Registrar General as opposed to an Assistant Registrar General. But I don't want to say too much because I don't want to appear to be unfair in my criticizing public servants about how quickly or how less than my timeline they do things in. These things take time.
Good afternoon, Minister. Elizabeth Gonzalez from Guardian Media.
That's my wife's name, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, Elizabeth.
Good afternoon. I would like to know why wasn't the Chief Sec a part of or made aware of all that you outlined that has the process that has started in August? I'm asking because on the 2 occasions that the issue was brought to the public, it was brought by him. So it seems as though he was somewhat in the dark about what is happening to rectify the issue. Well,
I'll answer that in this way, Elizabeth. I can't speak for why the Chief Secretary has said the couple of things that he has said and what is the information that has prompted him to say what he has said. I see the solution to the challenges that exist in the Registrar General's department being solutions to engage the persons that I have access to in my ministry. The Registrar General's department is part of my ministry. There are human resource challenges in terms of building out the human resource capacity to put out the advertisements, to advertise the positions that people have to be recruited for, and then the recruitment process that has to take place. There are other such processes that have to take place. I'm trying to concentrate on those things that I am able to give some measurable influence over and measurable control over. And it would be probably a little objectionable if in answering your question, I were to say that I had any measurable influence or control over the Chief Secretary. So I wouldn't want to engage with him in areas that I don't think I need to engage with him in, because I would be unfair to him.
And I'm not sure, just piggybacking on that question, I'm not sure if you mentioned it and I missed it. Was the Chief Secretary also part of this meeting that was held here?
No, the Chief Secretary was not part of today's meeting. The meeting today was with the two members of Parliament for Tobago, East and West, and the Lawyers Association, and in attendance were Permanent Secretary of the Office of the Attorney General, Deputy Registrar General, Ms. Nicole Moonan, who I compliment because she came out this morning in place of the Registrar General, who fell ill and came out at short notice and did a very good job of answering multiple questions over the course of a 3-hour meeting that took place this morning, and Mr. Kieran Francis, the ICT manager.
Mr. Armour, Corey Connolly, Newsday.
Good day, sir.
What you've outlined before in terms of the measures to improve the systems, is there any way of sort of concretizing everything so as to avoid a future recurrence of these issues?
I think the concretizing of it is I split up the short-term plans in two areas. One was managerial and resources. I think the concretizing is that we recognize that there are improvements that need to take place at a managerial level, putting in place persons with the authority, and it was a point that was very well made this morning by one of the persons in the meeting, putting persons in positions in Tobago who are substantively employed at a senior level so that they have the confidence, the skill, and the experience to be able to take decisions and implement them, as opposed to having to refer it upstairs to some other office. That's one of the things in concrete terms that we are doing in the build-out of the solutions that we're building out. And otherwise, we're in terms of resources, so that's what I mean by managerial. And otherwise, in terms of resources, as we speak, there are the top floor of the building where the RG is now is being equipped with equipment and staff. And we have, as we speak, 2 senior legal officers who are supposed to take up office today. And there are other interviews that have been completed and persons who are coming in. So the concretizing of the solution is to improve the managerial capacity on the ground in Tobago and to improve the complement of resources that are available in Tobago. No, I'm not taking that. No, thank you. I would prefer to answer it in very limited terms. One bill was the constitutional amendment bill, which the opposition voted against, so it didn't go through. And that bill was intended to give a qualitatively improved self-autonomy to Tobago. The other bill, the Tobago House of Assembly bill, has a number of provisions in it that would allow the Tobago House of Assembly under that bill, which was passed and approved by Parliament, to be able to, for the Tobago House of Assembly to be able to run itself in a much more autonomous way. But because the opposition voted against the Constitution Amendment Bill, the Tobago bill that we did pass is now on hold. We have to go back to the drawing board because it would not be able to take effect given that the opposition did not support the amendment bill. That's as much as I can say.
Are you disappointed?
I am. I happen to be there. I don't have to attend the House of Representatives. I'm a senator, but I always attempt as best as I can to attend the House of Representatives because sometimes my advice might be needed on something that is happening. And I was there for the debate on the two bills, and I was disappointed that the opposition voted against the bill. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that I should say thank you all, and thank you to the people of Tobago. And again, I want to underline that I almost have to say thank you to the people of Tobago for being as patient as they have been. I would not have been surprised if when I got off the plane this morning, I had people with placards, you know, because I had asked for a media release to be put out to say that I was coming to Tobago today. And I would not have been surprised if I had seen people with placards, you know, calling me to task. And I am grateful for the patience. Not in Tobago, all you're well behaved. But I'm grateful for the patience of Tobago people, and I repeat the undertaking that I've given that I am going to try as best as I can to keep track of this to ensure that what we are putting in place now looks forward to resolving the problems so that we don't have to go back in the past to complain about what happened yesterday or 6 months ago. Thank you all very much. Yeah.
And thank you to you, Senator, the Honorable Reginald T.A. Armour, SC and Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Ms. Indira Rampal-Chedi, Permanent Secretary, Acting Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, and to you, the members of the media and the viewing public, I say thank you for joining us and engaging in this discussion, and we look forward to having you again. Thank you and good afternoon.
This is TTT. Live for